The year was 1942, and the vast blue expanse of the Pacific had become a graveyard for American bombers. The Imperial Japanese Navy's Zero fighters reigned supreme, their sleek white bodies slicing effortlessly through the humid air. Above coral islands and endless stretches of ocean, the Zeros danced with deadly precision, agile, lightning-fast, and nearly untouchable. Every encounter felt hopeless for the outnumbered American pilots flying slower, heavier aircraft. Many didn't return. Those who did carried the haunted look of men who had stared into the sun and seen death coming at 300 miles per hour. The Pacific skies belonged to Japan, or so it seemed. But on one hazy morning, radar operators spotted something unfamiliar, a strange aircraft formation moving fast and high, farther than any single-engine plane should fly. Japanese pilots squinted toward the horizon and saw twin trails of vapor, splitting the sky like forks of silver lightning. It wasn't a formation, it was a single type of aircraft with two engines, twin tails, and a presence that defied everything they knew about American planes. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning had arrived, sleek, powerful, and unlike anything ever seen in the Pacific theater. As the sun rose higher, its polished aluminum reflected blinding light across the clouds. What once was a battlefield of despair for the Allies was about to become a proving ground for one of the most revolutionary fighters of World War II, a machine that would soon make the unstoppable Japanese Zeros look obsolete. The Pacific's balance of power was shifting, and the roar of twin Allison engines signaled the beginning of a new era in air warfare. The birth of the Lightning. Long before it ruled the skies of the Pacific, the Lockheed P-38 Lightning was born out of an ambitious dream in a California hangar. A dream to build the fastest, highest-flying, most lethal fighter on Earth. In 1937, when the U.S. Army Air Corps issued a daring request for a high-altitude interceptor that could outrun and outclimb anything in existence, few believed it could be done. But at Lockheed's secret Burbank facility, a young visionary engineer named Kelly Johnson and his team, later known as the Skunk Works, accepted the impossible challenge. What emerged from their drafting tables looked nothing like any fighter before it. Two powerful Allison V-1710 engines, mounted on long booms, connected by a central pod housing the cockpit and nose guns. Twin tails arched behind like a predatory bird mid-dive. Test pilots who first laid eyes on it called it futuristic, almost alien. It was a machine ahead of its time, and many doubted it would even fly. But in January 1939, the prototype, designated the XP-38, took to the skies. As it roared over California's mountains, it shattered expectations, reaching over 400 miles per hour, a speed unimaginable for the era. Newspapers dubbed it the Lightning, and Lockheed engineers couldn't have chosen a more fitting name. It was fast, deadly, and silent until it struck. Still, perfection came at a cost. The twin engines introduced aerodynamic challenges, control problems, and a dangerous phenomenon called compressibility during high-speed dives. Pilots would later call those moments the lightning's bite. Yet, despite the flaws, the P-38's promise was undeniable. It could fly farther, faster, and higher than any other Allied fighter. When war erupted across the Pacific, and American pilots found themselves outmatched by the nimble Japanese Zeros, commanders realized this was the weapon they needed. The P-38 wasn't just a fighter, it was a statement, proof that American engineering could turn desperation into dominance. And soon, its twin engines would roar over the Pacific, rewriting the rules of aerial warfare. The first missions over the Pacific. It was August 1942, the Pacific sun blazing down on a restless airstrip in New Guinea. A small group of P-38 Lightnings stood poised for their first combat mission in the theater, gleaming silver arrows lined up against a backdrop of jungle and coral airfields carved out by American engineers. The air was thick with humidity, the scent of oil and aviation fuel mingling with the faint aroma of salt from the nearby sea. Ground crews worked furiously beneath the twin-engine beasts, tightening bolts, checking ammunition, and wiping grime from the aircraft's shark-like noses. For the pilots, most of them barely in their 20s, this was more than a mission. It was a test of whether the P-38 could survive in one of the harshest combat environments on Earth. Many had heard the legends of the Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0, an aircraft feared for its agility and deadly precision. American flyers who had faced it in P-40s and Wildcats often never returned. But as the Lightnings taxied toward the runway, twin props spinning with synchronized fury, a new kind of confidence filled the air. The P-38 was fast, so fast that it could outrun anything the Japanese could throw at it. When the order came, "Thunder flight, take off." The ground trembled. Twin engines roared in harmony, propellers slicing through the humid air, and the sleek aircraft lifted off in unison, climbing effortlessly toward the clouds. Within minutes, the formation reached 20,000 feet, the pilots gazing down at the endless emerald canopy below. Then came the radio call, "Bandits inbound, east vector." Out of the rising sun appeared a swarm of Zeros, fast, agile, and hungry for battle. But this time, the tables were about to turn. The Lightnings dove in pairs, their twin engines howling as they plunged into the dogfight. The first bursts of .50 caliber fire tore through the sky, tracers streaking across the blue. A Japanese fighter tried to turn inside a P-38, but it couldn't. The Lightning climbed sharply, banking into a wide, powerful arc, then rolled over and unleashed another deadly burst. The Zero exploded in a fireball, its wreckage spiraling into the ocean below. Over the next few minutes, the battle became a blur of speed and thunder. The Zeros twisted and darted, but the Lightnings struck with brutal precision, using their superior climb rate and heavy firepower to dominate the fight. When the smoke cleared, the Americans had scored several kills, and not a single P-38 had been lost. Word spread fast across the Pacific. The Japanese had underestimated the Lightning, and now they had met their match. From that day forward, the P-38 would be known not just as an interceptor, but as a hunter, the aircraft that finally broke the myth of Japanese air superiority. August 1940. The summer skies over southern England have become a battlefield. The Luftwaffe's objective is clear: crush the RAF, pave the way for Operation Sea Lion, and bring Britain to her knees. But what awaited them high above the English countryside was not submission, it was defiance. The RAF's fighter command operated with deadly precision, from radar stations on the coast to control rooms deep underground. Every blip on the screen meant lives in motion. Every scramble order meant another duel among the clouds. The Germans believed they held the advantage: more aircraft, more experience, more momentum. But what they hadn't anticipated was the unbreakable will of a few hundred young men, many barely out of their teens, fighting for home, for freedom, and for the future. The Germans believed they held the advantage: more aircraft, more experience, more momentum. But what they hadn't anticipated was the unbreakable will of a few hundred young men, many barely out of their teens, fighting for home, for freedom, and for the future. The RAF was outnumbered, but never outmatched in spirit. The radio call sign Tally-Ho became their anthem, a cry of courage echoing through the heavens. By the end of each day, the sky would fall silent again, filled not with thunder, but with smoke and loss. Friends who had shared breakfast together would never land again. Yet every sunrise brought new wings into the air. This was not just a battle for territory. It was a battle for belief, that freedom was worth the risk, and that even when the odds were impossible, courage could still fly higher than fear. The turning tide. As the days of August bled into September 1940, the tide of war in the skies began to shift, subtly at first, then unmistakably. The Luftwaffe, confident in its numerical superiority, launched wave after wave of bombers against British airfields, radar stations, and coastal towns. But what the Germans could not see was the invisible web of technology and intelligence that guided every British response. The chain of radar stations, known as the Dowding System, after Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, became Britain's unseen shield. From Dover to the Isle of Wight, massive radar towers scanned the skies day and night, detecting incoming aircraft long before they reached the coast. The information flowed swiftly to the control rooms of Fighter Command, where skilled operators plotted enemy movements on great maps, their hands moving colored markers with surgical precision. While the Luftwaffe relied on brute force, the RAF fought with coordination and cunning. Every radar blip, every pilot's report, became part of a living network of defense. Squadrons were scrambled not randomly, but strategically, sent to intercept exactly where they were needed. For the first time in history, a nation used real-time electronic intelligence to orchestrate aerial warfare. In the underground operations room at Bentley Priory, the calm voice of Air Vice Marshal Keith Park directed the chaos above. "Let's meet them over Canterbury," he would murmur, as fighter groups roared into the air, guided not by chance but by data. The German High Command, unaware of how deep this technological advantage ran, continued pounding at what they thought were Britain's weak points. But every bombing raid drew them deeper into a trap of attrition. The RAF's pilots, exhausted yet relentless, learned to use home ground advantage, shorter flight times, faster rearming, and the knowledge that, if shot down, they could return to the fight the next day. Meanwhile, many Luftwaffe pilots who fell into the Channel or British fields became prisoners of war, never to fly again. As September progressed, frustration grew within the German ranks. The British radar masts that had been bombed earlier were swiftly repaired, while German reconnaissance failed to grasp how vital those structures truly were. In Berlin, Göring's confidence began to waver. And then came the fatal miscalculation. The Luftwaffe shifted its attacks from airfields to London itself, hoping to break British morale. But in doing so, they gave the RAF the breathing space it desperately needed to recover, rearm, and reorganize. By mid-September, the balance had shifted. The radar screens at Fighter Command began lighting up with new precision, squadrons intercepted bombers further out, and the Luftwaffe's losses grew heavier by the day. What had started as a desperate defense had turned into a demonstration of tactical brilliance, of brains over brawn, and technology over terror. The few, as Churchill would later call them, were no longer merely surviving, they were prevailing. The Blitz begins. By early September 1940, frustration and fury boiled within the Luftwaffe's high command. The once confident German Air Force had failed to crush the RAF, and Hitler's invasion timetable, Operation Sea Lion, was slipping away. In a moment of rage and arrogance, Hitler gave a new order. If Britain's fighters would not die in the skies, its people would burn on the ground. The focus of the war shifted from airfields to the heart of the nation, London. Thus began the Blitz, the unrelenting bombardment that would test the very soul of Britain. On the evening of September 7, 1940, London's peaceful twilight was shattered by the low, ominous drone of hundreds of engines. The first bombs fell on the East End, the docks, warehouses, and tenements, igniting a storm of fire that devoured entire streets. Black smoke curled skyward, blotting out the stars as searchlights crisscrossed the heavens like ghostly sabers. The city's heartbeat quickened with every distant rumble. Civilians, clutching gas masks, and small children, rushed into underground shelters and subway tunnels, their only refuge against the rain of steel and flame above. That night marked the beginning of 57 consecutive nights of terror. London burned, but it did not break. From Buckingham Palace to the smallest alley, the spirit of defiance rose with the smoke. Fire brigades worked tirelessly, faces smeared with soot, dragging hoses through infernos to save what little they could. In the dim orange glow, nurses carried the wounded through rubble-strewn streets, while rescue teams dug survivors from collapsed buildings with bare hands. Above the inferno, the RAF continued to fight. Even as bombs fell, the Hurricanes and Spitfires scrambled into the night sky to intercept the bombers and their escorting Messerschmitts. For the first time, radar and anti-aircraft defenses worked hand in hand, guiding the night fighters toward enemy formations invisible to the naked eye. It was a deadly ballet of light and shadow, tracer rounds streaking upward, explosions blooming like malevolent stars. The Luftwaffe believed the terror campaign would crush British morale. But in truth, it did the opposite. The fires of London forged unity. Ordinary citizens became silent soldiers, helping the wounded, sharing food, singing softly in shelters to drown the noise above. When dawn broke over the smoldering ruins, Londoners swept the streets, hung out their laundry, and went back to work. The message to Berlin was unmistakable: Britain still stood. The Blitz had turned the battle from a military campaign into a test of endurance, one that the British met with iron will. And while the flames illuminated the night, they also exposed a fatal flaw in Hitler's strategy. By shifting his focus from the RAF's airfields to the civilian heart of Britain, he had given the defenders precious time to rebuild, to rearm, and to prepare for the decisive confrontation still to come. Defending the night, searchlights and anti-aircraft fire. As the nights of the Blitz grew longer and darker, London's defenders learned to fight not only the enemy in the skies, but the fear that came with the silence between bombs. The Luftwaffe believed that under the cover of night, their bombers were untouchable. But the British were adapting. From the rooftops of London to the fields beyond its suburbs, a new defense network was taking shape, one that turned the night itself into a battlefield of light, sound, and steel. Searchlights, tall and ghostly, swept across the smoky heavens, their brilliant beams piercing the blackness like blades. Operated mostly by young women of the Auxiliary Territorial Service, these towers of light scanned for the telltale silhouette of a Heinkel or Dornier bomber. When a beam caught its mark, dozens of others converged, locking the German aircraft in a cage of white fire. In that instant, the bomber became prey, a glowing target for the flak gunners waiting below. The thunder followed seconds later. From every corner of the city, anti-aircraft guns roared to life, the famous ack-ack fire that became London's nightly heartbeat. Shells burst high above, scattering shards of flame that flickered across the sky. The gunners worked tirelessly, sweat and soot streaking their faces as they adjusted their sights and reloaded under the deafening chorus of explosions. Below them, the streets trembled with each blast, but the people cheered when a flaming bomber spiraled down through the darkness, proof that the city could fight back. Radar, still a new and secret technology, played its silent part. Hidden in bunkers and coastal stations, operators tracked the incoming formations before they even reached the city, relaying positions to gun batteries and night fighter squadrons. For the first time in history, war was being fought with invisible waves, a deadly dance of signals and countersignals, guiding the defenders' hands in the pitch-black night. Even as bombs rained down, discipline and courage never faltered. On one night, a gun crew at Woolwich Arsenal fired over 1,000 rounds without pause, their ears ringing, eyes burning from the gun smoke. Some batteries ran so hot that barrels glowed red, but still they fired, defending homes, hospitals, and history itself. From the ground it was a surreal sight, a sky alive with movement and color, searchlights weaving luminous patterns, shells bursting in orange flares, and bombers twisting desperately to escape the trap. It was chaos made beautiful, the art of survival under fire. The Luftwaffe had entered the night expecting to dominate. Instead, they found a city that refused to surrender its skies. London had become a fortress of light and thunder, its defenders turning every night into a testament of human ingenuity and defiance. The human spirit, courage amid the ruins. When dawn broke over London after another night of relentless bombing, the city resembled a smoldering wasteland, streets lined with shattered glass, homes reduced to skeletal frames, and smoke curling skyward like silent prayers. But through the rubble, something unshakable stirred, the spirit of a people who refused to bow. The Blitz had aimed to break London's will, yet every morning, the survivors emerged from the underground shelters not in despair, but with determination burning in their eyes. Women in aprons swept debris from the doorways of what had once been bakeries and bookshops, determined to open again. Children played amid the ruins, laughing as if to mock the bombs that had failed to silence them. The milkman still made his rounds, weaving his cart through the rubble, bottles clinking cheerfully, a sound that became a symbol of normalcy in a world turned upside down. In the underground stations, families huddled together during the night, sharing stories, songs, and whatever food they had. Candles flickered along the tunnel walls, casting long shadows as voices rose in unison to sing "We'll Meet Again." The air was thick with the scent of fear, yet also with hope, the kind that only grows stronger in the face of darkness. Firefighters and rescue workers became the quiet heroes of the streets. Clad in heavy coats and soot-covered helmets, They raced through flames to pull survivors from collapsed buildings, often risking their own lives in the process. Many worked for days without rest, their faces illuminated by the glow of burning streets, their resolve as solid as the brick walls they fought to save. And yet, amid all the destruction, there was unity. The rich and poor, the old and young, all stood together in a kind of silent brotherhood. Tea was shared freely. Strangers became family. Letters from soldiers at the front were read aloud in shelters, bringing news and courage in equal measure. The king and queen visited bombed neighborhoods, walking through the rubble alongside their people, refusing to hide in safety. That gesture alone lifted spirits across the nation. In one haunting yet beautiful moment, as St. Paul's Cathedral stood untouched amid a sea of fire, captured in a now iconic photograph, Londoners saw it as a sign, a message that no matter how much the city burned, its heart would never fall. This was the true victory of the Blitz, not measured in planes shot down or bombs defused, but in the unyielding resilience of the human spirit. The enemy could destroy buildings, but not courage. They could darken the skies, but never extinguish hope. The battle for the skies, the RAF strikes back. By mid-September 1940, the Royal Air Force had begun to turn the tide in the Battle of Britain. The morning skies above southern England, once dominated by the looming silhouettes of Luftwaffe bombers, now bore the determined shapes of Spitfires and Hurricanes, engines roaring like thunder as they cut through the clouds. Pilots hunched in cockpits, eyes sharp behind wind-splattered glass, tracking German formations with the precision of hunters, every movement measured, every decision potentially life or death. Radar stations along the coast had become the kingdom's unseen guardians, their operators intently scanning blips that revealed approaching waves of enemy aircraft. From these stations, Fighter Command directed squadrons with surgical precision, guiding pilots to intercept and break apart Luftwaffe formations before they could reach London. Each call from the operations room, crisp, urgent, and exact, rippled through the air, sending squadrons spiraling skyward in coordinated strikes. Above the white-capped waves of the English Channel, the skies erupted into kinetic ballet. Spitfires twisted and dived, their sleek fuselages glinting in the sunlight, while Messerschmitts responded with deadly maneuvering, their gunfire streaking across the sky. Hurricanes held tight in protective formations, strafing bomber clusters with a relentless rhythm, forcing the enemy to disperse or face annihilation. Smoke trails, torn metal, and falling aircraft punctuated the battle, creating a chaotic tapestry of aerial combat that tested every ounce of skill and courage. Despite the chaos, camaraderie defined the RAF's approach. Wingmen communicated through hand signals and radio codes, protecting one another and coordinating attacks in a deadly dance that often decided the fate of entire missions. Fuel gauges ran low, guns jammed, and adrenaline surged, yet every pilot pressed forward, fueled by the knowledge that each victory in the sky spared countless lives on the ground below. From airfields strewn across southern England, mechanics worked feverishly to repair and refuel the returning fighters, their hands blackened with oil and their faces etched with exhaustion. Ground crews became as critical to victory as the pilots themselves, ensuring that every plane could return to battle with minimal delay. The teamwork between sky and ground created a seamless rhythm of defense and offense, amplifying the RAF's strategic advantage. By the day's end, reports tallied dozens of enemy aircraft shot down, their pilots either captured or plummeting into the sea. London's skyline, scarred from the Blitz, was spared from another night of destruction. The message was clear: the Luftwaffe could no longer dominate the skies unchallenged. The RAF's resilience, skill, and ingenuity were reshaping the aerial battlefield, sending a signal to Germany that Britain would not fall quietly, and that its defenders were now capable of striking back with lethal precision. The counteroffensive, pushing back the Luftwaffe. By late September 1940, the Royal Air Force had not only stabilized its defenses, but began taking the fight to the Luftwaffe with calculated aggression. The skies over southern England were no longer merely a battlefield of survival. They had become the proving ground for a counteroffensive that would challenge Germany's air superiority. From strategically positioned airfields, squadrons of Spitfires and Hurricanes roared into formation, engines thrumming like a mechanical heartbeat, each pilot aware that today's sortie could tilt the balance of the aerial war. Radar operators and intelligence officers became the invisible commanders of this offensive, providing precise coordinates of approaching Luftwaffe forces, their formations and flight paths. Pilots received their mission briefings under the fading light of dawn, maps and charts sprawled across tables, while the distant hum of aircraft engines on the tarmac reminded them that theory would soon be tested in brutal reality. When the order came, squadrons launched simultaneously, climbing swiftly through layers of cloud, their sharp silhouettes cutting against the golden morning sun. The Luftwaffe, expecting to encounter weary defensive fighters, was met instead with audacious, coordinated attacks. RAF pilots executed rolling maneuvers, diving from above to engage bombers and escorts alike with precision gunnery. Each sortie was meticulously planned to exploit weak points in enemy formations, forcing German aircraft to break ranks and face concentrated fire. Smoke and tracer rounds painted a chaotic but controlled picture in the skies, while the deafening roar of engines and gunfire resonated across valleys and coastlines. This counteroffensive required more than daring pilots. It demanded seamless coordination between air and ground. Anti-aircraft batteries provided suppressive cover, limiting Luftwaffe maneuverability, while ground crews ensured fighters returned to battle-ready status with lightning efficiency. The rhythm of attack, retreat, and rapid redeployment turned the aerial engagement into a complex choreography of speed, strategy, and raw courage. The psychological effect on German pilots was immediate and profound. No longer could they rely on the element of surprise. The RAF's proactive strikes disrupted bombing runs, downed aircraft, and forced recalibrations of Luftwaffe tactics. Each engagement chipped away at morale, demonstrating that Britain's defenders were not merely reactive, but capable of striking with precision and boldness. By the end of the day, reports of destroyed enemy aircraft surged, and the Luftwaffe, though still formidable, began to recognize that the skies above England were fiercely contested, not ceded. The counter-offensive marked a turning point. Britain's air defense had evolved from survival to dominance, reshaping the strategic landscape of the war. Pilots, ground crews, and command staff worked in a seamless alliance, proving that tactical innovation, courage, and coordination could transform the defensive posture into a potent offensive force capable of challenging even the most experienced enemy. The Luftwaffe's desperation, shifting targets. By October 1940, the Luftwaffe's initial strategy of targeting RAF airfields and radar installations had faltered, unable to break Britain's defensive network. Frustration mounted in the German high command, and the focus of their attacks shifted toward civilian centers, London, Coventry, and other industrial cities, in a bid to crush morale and force a surrender. From the cockpits of German bombers, the landscape of England looked deceptively calm, but below, the city streets were alive with urgency, civilians hurrying to shelters, firefighters preparing for the inevitable, and night watch volunteers stationed on rooftops. The Luftwaffe approached with tight formations of Heinkel He-111s and Dornier Do-17s, escorted by Messerschmitt Bf-109s. Pilots were tense, aware that Britain's skies were no longer passive. Every sortie now carried the risk of encountering a well-coordinated RAF interception. Tracer lines streaked through the darkening clouds as anti-aircraft fire from the ground converged with the RAF's persistent sorties. Smoke and flames began to rise from incendiary impacts, illuminating the cityscape with eerie, flickering light. German crews soon realized that civilian bombing was not as simple as anticipated. Night navigation was treacherous, visibility poor, and RAF fighters, using radar intelligence, struck quickly and unpredictably. Each wave of bombers was met with resistance from both the air and the ground. The psychological toll on Luftwaffe pilots grew as flak shattered formation cohesion and fighters picked off stragglers. The once feared invaders were now increasingly vulnerable, their confidence waning under relentless British coordination and defense. The shift in targets highlighted a fundamental change in the battle. The Luftwaffe could no longer dictate the tempo. Cities were fortified not only with shelters and fire brigades, but with vigilant observation posts, searchlights, and flak batteries. Civilians became an integral part of the defensive effort, signaling a total war environment where resistance extended beyond the military. The air campaign, intended to terrorize, now revealed the resilience of Britain's society and its ability to adapt under fire. By nightfall, London had suffered destruction, but the RAF's relentless counterattacks had inflicted significant losses on the Luftwaffe. German pilots returned exhausted, navigating damaged aircraft over the Channel, while Londoners emerged cautiously from shelters, witnessing the resilience of their city and the courage of its defenders. The Luftwaffe's desperation was clear. Strategic miscalculations, combined with Britain's integrated defensive network, had transformed what they assumed would be a swift conquest into a grueling and uncertain campaign. The stage was set for the next phase, a night of destruction and determination, where Britain's defenders would continue to turn darkness into a weapon, guiding the narrative of courage, innovation, and endurance in the face of overwhelming force. Defending the night, searchlights and anti-aircraft fire. As darkness fell over London, the city transformed into a theater of light and shadow, where every street and rooftop played a role in the defense against the Luftwaffe. Massive searchlights sliced through the night sky in brilliant white beams, cutting through the smoke and haze from earlier bombings. These beams crisscrossed in a dazzling network, scanning the heavens for the silhouettes of incoming German bombers. Anti-aircraft batteries, strategically positioned on rooftops, open fields, and along the riverbanks, rumbled to life. The sharp cracks of flak guns punctuated the night, exploding shells in midair with sparks cascading like fireworks, illuminating the terrifying silhouette of enemy planes as they descended. RAF spotters and civilian volunteers worked in perfect coordination with radar stations, calling out positions and guiding the searchlights to track each aircraft's path. The rhythmic, almost musical pattern of anti-aircraft bursts mingled with the whine of approaching engines, creating a tense symphony of anticipation and fear. Every bomber that wandered into a beam of light became a target, while fighter planes, alerted by radar and visual signals, swooped from above to intercept. The combined effect of searchlights, flak, and fighter patrols created a nightmarish environment for the Luftwaffe, turning what they expected to be simple raids into deadly gauntlets. Civilians watched from dimly lit windows or made their way cautiously to shelters, often glimpsing the sky filled with light, fire, and smoke. The chaos of destruction was tempered by a shared sense of vigilance and purpose. Londoners understood that the night itself had become a weapon, with every flare and shell representing a protective shield against the onslaught. The German pilots, many inexperienced in night operations, struggled to maintain formation and direction. The dazzling searchlights, combined with exploding flak shells and the ever-present threat of RAF fighters, created disorientation, fear, and mounting losses. It was here, in the crucible of London's night skies, that the ingenuity and courage of the British defense truly shone. By dawn, the results were evident: bombers destroyed or damaged, lives saved by the coordinated defense, and a city's morale bolstered by the resilience of both its defenders and civilians. The night's defense had proven that technology, coordination, and human courage could turn even the darkest hours into a force multiplier, setting the stage for the final pushback against the Luftwaffe. The human spirit, courage amid the ruins. September 15, 1940, dawned over a city scarred by relentless bombing, yet Londoners emerged from their shelters with a quiet, unyielding determination. Streets were littered with rubble, shattered windows reflected the early light, and blackened walls bore the marks of incendiary raids. Despite the devastation, the heartbeat of the city remained strong. Neighbors helping neighbors, fire brigades battling blazes amidst the chaos, and volunteers clearing debris to make pathways for emergency services. Every act, no matter how small, became a testament to resilience and solidarity in the face of overwhelming adversity. Amid the ruins, children clung to their parents, learning early lessons in courage, while shopkeepers and workers returned to salvage what they could, keeping the city's economy and spirit alive. Churches, schools, and community centers became impromptu shelters, soup kitchens, and gathering points, uniting citizens in shared struggle. The human spirit, illuminated by acts of bravery and kindness, contrasted sharply with the smoke and destruction left behind by Luftwaffe raids. In parallel, the RAF continued their tireless patrols overhead, and anti-aircraft crews remained vigilant, yet it was the people on the ground who truly embodied endurance. Stories spread quickly: a woman rescuing trapped neighbors, a firefighter carrying a child to safety, or civilians quietly repairing bombed homes overnight. These moments, often fleeting and undocumented, formed the invisible backbone of London's defiance. By nightfall, the city stood battered but unbroken. The courage of its citizens not only preserved morale but also inspired the fighters in the skies, creating a symbiotic relationship between those defending overhead and those enduring below. The human spirit had turned the ruins into a symbol of resilience, sending a message to the world and to the enemy alike: London would endure, rebuild, and rise stronger with each attack. This segment closes the story of the Blitz, highlighting that while aircraft and weapons shaped the battlefield, it was the unbreakable courage and unity of ordinary people that defined the true heart of resistance.